Hey, and welcome to TSOB. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are interested in investing or starting their own funds. We are Adam Anderson and Zach Eikenberry. Join us to get a behind-the-scenes look at the relationships between founding entrepreneurs and the VCs that invest in them. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the man, the myth, the legend, Zach Eikenberry. You have read the book. You've seen the movie. Now experience in your ear holes the dulcet tones and dripping wisdom of his vocal parts. You've paid for the whole seat. You'll only need the edge. Zach Eikenberry. Hey, buddy.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Mom. I'm doing okay. You don't need to stop by the store and get anything. We're fine. Thanks. I love the idea. You know, my mom stopped reading my books. I've got 6 books. Not even my mom reads them anymore. I was like, do you want to put it on the shelf next to my first book? And she's like, no, that shelf's full. That's good.
Is there any book that after the final editor passed that you actually went back and read verbatim?
No.
You haven't even read your own books verbatim.
I don't. I mean, I know what's in there, kind of, sometimes. I had a cup of coffee. I'm going to get my coffee, talk to the audience, tell them things. I'll be right back. Yeah, by the way, guys, we don't edit this a lot. We kind of edit it, but we don't like to hear ourselves talk either. So we don't re-listen to the episodes. We just lay it down and send it out. Should we, I don't know, fix it? Nah, it's probably brilliant.
I do listen.
Do you?
To the episodes. I am one of our subscribers.
Man, you're one of my 6 favorite people. All right, fill the empty space while I go get my coffee. Go, do it.
I am not the host, but now that Adam is not here, thank you all for tuning in. We can talk about some really meaningful things when it comes to how entrepreneurs are smarter and better than investors. In particular, venture capital investors, like my counterpart on this podcast. I think entrepreneurs are clearly more intelligent than investors. 2, entrepreneurs are much more ruggedly handsome than most investors, including my co-host. And 3, I would say entrepreneurs do more for the world than investors.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm going down to your neck of the woods next week, and I'm trying something new, a concept where rather than going and asking an LP for $1 million or whatever, I'm putting together a package of portfolio companies that I want to invest in. And I'm like, hey, put in 100K, put in 200K, and it'll split up against these 6 different portfolio companies, and they're all space themed. And they'll have something to do with a topic of deep tech. And I have one little M&A roll up playing in there to cash flow all the space companies. And, when I look at that, all 6 of those entrepreneurs are doing crazy good things and changing the world. And I'm a broker who stands in between people who have money and cool deals. It's almost like the ultimate connector. Dude, do you want to meet my friends? They're doing some cool stuff. That's what I'm doing. That's what a VC is. Do you want to meet my cool friends?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because that's what a capital allocator does, right? Is they are the ones that sit between the people with capital and the folks that could deploy and utilize it. And they broker that, right?
Yeah.
Because the market's not efficient enough for people with capital to understand the sum total of all deals and possibilities. So there's a market inefficiency there. Now, I do think crowdfunding and the like will address some of the inefficiencies. I'm also not a fan of just the Big Brother SEC approach that said you have to be an accredited investor so that it gatekeeps people without money from investing in potentially high return organizations. So only rich people can get involved in private equity, where private equity is the best way to generate wealth. And so especially meaningful or legacy wealth, we will let people without money go play the Powerball, but we won't let them invest in private equity. And crowdsourcing is changing some of that, but there's still too many rules to protect people from themselves.
Well, is it trying to protect people from themselves, or do you remember To the Moon and GameStop and all these things? Or is it, hey, don't screw up the thing we already got by bringing massive amounts of wealth we can't control from a whole bunch of people?
Yeah, so yes, that's right. There's a couple of things at play here. The rules were built to protect nefarious and snake oil salesmen, entrepreneurs, the people who are starting up companies.
That's so weird. That was my wrestler name, Snake Oil.
Yes.
It was Greco-Roman. Most people didn't have nicknames, but I was like, I got one. I'm Snake Oil. I digress.
Like, okay, Adam, but this is just 6th grade wrestling. Go
Snake
for
Oil. I'm going to take yoga with Ric Flair. Snake Oil.
This is just your PE class. You're going to get an A either way, Snake Oil.
You showed up, bro. You're fine. Snake Oil. So the SEC was there to protect Greco-Roman wrestlers.
The idea is that, hey, you don't have enough information to know whether or not this company is legitimate. People who have made money before, they have the means to lose it. So like they can take the risk and they can assume the risk of loss to zero, where somebody without that much capital can't assume that same amount of risk. That was the idea.
Sure.
What we're looking at now, moving into crowdfunding and the like, and I've actually started seeing this, which is crazy, because internationally, there are not that many rules when it comes to investing. You can advertise. I remember when I was traveling in Israel 4 or 5 years ago, there was a hospital that was starting and they were building like this advanced research cancer center.
Yeah.
And they had commercials where you could call in and invest in this hospital. And I thought, like, whoa, you trust your people and you will permit the commercialization through commercials of a hospital right there so that people can own it. I thought that was really interesting. Again, there's probably some dark sides to that. But when it comes to really pushing the frontier, like, yeah, there are dark sides to, Bitcoin, there are dark sides to NFTs, etc. But when it comes to actually making innovation and changing the world, we have to assume these type of risks. And I think eliminating accredited investor standards would be a tremendous way forward. But it would cause more good than harm, but people aren't willing to pay that price of harm to get to the good. So I don't know if it will happen.
I don't know. I mean, that's the whole DeFi side of the house, is trying to get around some of those things. But it's also, why we have BBI funds and funds in the Caymans and stuff like that, is to let people do what they want to do. I was talking to a buddy of mine. Cheryl is signing up for a lottery to go to space. And she's like, yeah, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance. And it's better than the lottery.
Yeah, I heard the other day somebody say, like, I don't understand why people who play the lottery aren't more scared of lightning.
That's right. Or sharks. Like, oh my God. Yeah.
Like if you believe you're going to win the Powerball, you should also believe you're going to get struck by lightning. Like, it's the same amount of risk.
Yeah. That's why I had that's why I wear my tinfoil hat. It's all good.
That's right.
Hey, you got some interesting things happening next week. I got some interesting things happening next week. I had some cool things happen this week that I can't talk about because we're navigating the waters with some government stuff, and that has just been a full contact sport. I'm talking to people in the DoD, I'm talking to people in Space Force, and there's like all these crazy programs out there that have all been revamped. So like in the last 2 years, the government has revamped how they do venture, and it's like Nobody agrees, and they're still not good at it, but they sure are trying. So just playing in all those waters is interesting. And then going down to Tampa and Orlando next week to raise money and also to talk about a venture-based networking is going to be my week. What's your week? You're going to be traveling a little bit, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm going to be doing a road show for a group called Venture South, an angel syndicate network.
Matt Dunbar.
Yeah. So we're going to go talk to a number of groups, and we're going to see if we pass the hat. If there's a number of individual angels who want to invest, then it starts to trigger a fund carrying on investing. And there's a rumor that there is federal funds available that are to be invested in these type of companies. And as it stands for most things with the federal government, there's money promised on paper, but the actual push through and execution of that is different, right or wrongly, right? Like I think one of my favorite things one of my silver linings of a two-party system is neither party trusts the other. So when one party gets a law passed, the other party will work like hell to delay its implementation.
Oh yeah.
And vice versa. And in some ways, I'm grateful that our government moves slow, because it damages fewer things as it moves slower.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah. So I'm just saying there's funds out there available, and I'm sure we qualify. I'm not sure we'll actually receive those funds in time.
Well, I was talking to a guy last week, and he's talking about building a fund. And, it's one of the things that my firm does to help folks is build funds. And we're talking through it. And he's got this great vision of this entrepreneur ecosystem. And he's like, nah, but this is just not the right time to raise funds. I'm like, bro, if everyone thinks it's the wrong time to raise money, go raise money. If everyone thinks that valuations are too small and you can't win here, it's like, go have the conversations that no one else is having, right? And so you're about to go on this road show, and you're about to have all these conversations. Now, to remind me, this is not the bridge round. This is preparing for the Series A round, right? So you're wrapping up the bridge and you're moving on to Series A in short order.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, depending on the level of interest with Venture South, they might trip over into leading the round, helping set the terms. More than likely, they are going to be a participant. It's going to be part of a party. So what will happen is they'll all say, all right, we're in for X amount. Probably, if I had to guess, this group would commit somewhere between 750 and 1.5. And they would raise their hand and say, come back to us when you have the terms, when you have somebody ready to lead. And so that's what they would do best. They are a passive investor, right? So they do not require, unless they lead, they do not require board seats. They do not require anything abnormal to what is just standard and best practice with investor updates, etc.
Right.
So you take their money, you can let it ride. And so I think that has an appeal to us, and that's why I'm going to go talk with them. And so we shall see. But when it comes to the larger macroeconomic conditions out there, right, everything cuts both ways, right? So there's perhaps less capital available, or people are more reticent or hesitant to write a check, right? Because they want to maintain their liquidity, but they're also seeing fewer deals.
That's right.
And liquidity is being taxed right now at least 9.1% with inflation. And so and it could be even worse, right? When you're getting write down on losses on other parts, even if you maintain, again, I'm using liquidity, just cash, the inflation rate minus the savings rate might end up being 5 or 6%. So you're still paying 5 or 6% for the luxury of holding on to money.
Right.
And the
What a fascinating business case that is. You're paying X% for the privilege of doing nothing.
yeah. So if you
Cash is king, is it?
Yeah, when you have excess liquidity, right? So when you hit those thresholds of lifestyles able to be maintained, other financial goals for the people you care about are met or maintained, and you've already put the appropriate amount of funds and risk to work in, your real estate, your public markets, your whatever you're into.
Right.
The idea is that there's still liquidity there. There's still money there from these investor types who would say, yeah, this makes sense. I'll put my money into you for 5 years. And at least, even if it is a risk, more of a gamble, right? Like, we've shown that we're de-risking ourselves over time.
Mhm.
And if they invest on something like, a 12x multiple, and we hit our 3x growth rate, they're in for 4x when the market still trades at 8. Like, everything still works out math wise. And they've essentially, you know, in some ways you can think of it as tripled their money in 1 to 2 years on paper.
Right. Which
Now,
is exactly
capturing liquidity back out of a private equity or private company, private equity through VC or whatever, is difficult, but that's what the game we're in.
Well, so I will push back a little bit on it's difficult to pull money out of private equity. It's difficult to pull money out if it's not set up to allow the right kind of dividends to flow. So in this package deal that I'm experimenting with, where it's got 6 deals, it's got 4 space ones, it's got a real estate one, and then it's got this weird e-com roll-up play. And the whole reason we got this weird e-com roll-up play is that it throws off amazing dividends and also gives outside returns on the back end. And so the experiment I'm running, hey, your money's getting taxed because it's sitting there. Why not deploy it into a package of deals that with the entire group of them? We've got 2 dividend producing portfolio companies, and then we have 4 that are in advanced deep tech. So instead of taking a huge risk on a thing that may or may not pay off over the next 7 years, you're getting dividends off of the 2 winners, as we're also building the future with this other kind of deep tech, slow moving technology, slow capital. So, I think I've talked about it before, fast capital versus slow capital. I'm trying to get a package, a blend of fast capital, high return, dividend producing companies mixed with slow capital. If we're right, we created a brand new market and we crushed the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. So the corollary into real estate is that you have a rental property that's generating income.
Correct.
Well, the property values increase for one day you turn and flip it, right?
Yep.
And that makes a lot of sense. What's interesting about the e-commerce play is the location of inventory, right? So versus retail, which has to have the inventory in front of the buyer.
Yeah.
The e-commerce can have the inventory practically
everywhere,
located anywhere.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's on demand inventory. The inventory doesn't even exist when it gets sold.
Right.
And so I think that's it's a very interesting play. I do think it's going to be more and more competitive to get the consumer's attention into boutique e-commerce. And the gatekeeper for all that, of course, is still your Google search engine.
Well,
and so,
yeah. And
so my point is, I don't know how you can't, unlike real estate, which you can say historically every year it increased value by 3%, e-commerce as a value property is also speculative. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, maybe. So here's what we're doing. What we start with is we find Big Daddy private equity is like, we believe that use healthcare is where we want to buy. So we're willing to buy at 6x revenue or a 6S valuation or whatever, right? And if you can roll us up a portfolio that looks like this, we guarantee we'll buy it from you. So we have the buyer already done, right? So then we go and we find the other companies and we buy them at 3x. And so the game is when you hold these companies at 3x, you have 18 to 24 months to normalize supply chain, to do, all these things to get marketing working. And you begin to show the growth and you make the thing turn around, because usually you've got a bootstrapped solopreneur who's built a really cool, 6-7 figure e-com store, and they have no idea how to take it to the next level. And so private equity rolls in and buys a bunch of these guys, turns around, packages them up, and sells them up to the other higher private equity food chain. The reason I like e-com is because when I picture these roll-ups, what I'm picturing is, in order to maximize profits for the next version of the roll-up or the next stage of the roll-up, firing everybody. And it gives me heartburn to think of how you have to gut and kill companies. The humans in the companies get shed to create better results for the paper. And on e-com, a lot of this is just, hey, let's normalize supply chain. Let's put in some marketing. It's a lot less human capital that gets shed when you're doing these roll-ups inside of e-com. That's my hypothesis.
Perhaps. Here's something that I've been thinking about recently.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Perhaps, dude. Fine. All right. What have you been thinking about recently?
So employees who call it the, I don't know if this is still politically correct term, the white collared employee, the technology employee, the information employee who works remotely, who shows up every day in their pajamas and treats their work like a paycheck.
Yeah.
And versus the employee who wants to go meaningfully contribute to something with other people, right? Which leads them back to the office, which leads them more into higher engagement, conferences, etc.
Interesting.
And so my thought is, there's a place for the person who wants to show up in their pajamas, but it's probably things like e-commerce. The ones that are transactional, don't move the needle. Yeah, it helps people that they got their new piece of furniture within a 6-week window. That's great. I'm not discounting the fact that those serve needs, but that can be done in your pajamas. But when you're talking about companies like Hook Security, we don't mind building a remote workforce. A distributed can work from anywhere, but we want people who want to show up and actually make a difference. And they should care about their paycheck. It's stupid to say, I don't care about my paycheck. You should care about your paycheck. You should care about increasing your value and your compensation.
You said absolutely.
But there seems to be a difference for that. So when you talk about this human capital and this cold-hearted, MBA driven team who comes in, buys a company and sheds the human capital, if those people in there, those employees know that they're purely transactional and there's another place for them to go, it seems like a fair enough trade-off. What gets toxic is if somebody joins a furniture supply company and they're told they're part of a family forever, and they're in this e-commerce space, and then their owner sells for 3x, and then next thing you know, Anzu's Capital is realigning their org chart, fires them, and all they ever did was their job well.
Yeah. That's messy.
That's toxic and messy. But if they can see to the bottom and they're given the opportunity to, like I said, full disclosure, know what their role is, and hey, the trade-off for you showing up in your pajamas is your role is seen as transactional, and we're paying you what we can pay you.
Well, and that's the difference between being upfront with a thing and being not upfront with a thing. And if you're not upfront, it could be because the entrepreneur doesn't know. I don't know, man. I just started the thing and started working. I needed some help. Come here, Jimmy. Can you move these boxes? Okay, boom, boom, boom. Oh, crap. I got 100 employees now. Oh, how did this happen? Yeah, I'm stressed. I'm going to sell. All right, I'm out. And over that 10-year period, that poor entrepreneur didn't know what they were doing. And now they've set incorrect expectations. What I love that you've done inside of Hook was from day one, we're like, we are doing a startup that is going to grow. And as it grows, it will have different seasons. And you might be an incredibly appropriate, amazing human being for this season. And next season, you might hate what this company becomes because we have to over system. And so rarely do I see the amount of comfort in talking about what's next, with people being super open to, I might have to hire my boss, or I might have to change job roles, or I may not be appropriate going forward, and that's okay too. But it's like all of those conversations are already happening. And the vast majority of companies do not have those kind of conversations.
Yeah. And the example that I often hold up in my head was just how much vitriol there was from employees when MailChimp sold. And
Vitriol was my other wrestling name.
Snake oil and vitriol. You were a Gemini, aren't you?
Oh, Virgo. Shut up. So yes, I interrupted with my witty.
A Virgo is upset at me. What?
Yeah, my feelings. I'm not going to do anything about them. I just want to tell you about my feelings so you work around them.
You got it. All right.
Thanks, buddy. MailChimp, go ahead.
So MailChimp, right, their entire is like, we're going to change the way that email works and communication works on the internet. We're going to upgrade inboxes so that, people can communicate out directly into inboxes in a better way, et cetera, et cetera. And they added new features and they got into other commerce, et cetera, over time. But their founder and all them had this great vision, and they had arguably pretty aggressive compensation plans. They paid at or above market throughout, but then an offer came along that was too good to refuse by the founder to make them, and the founder gave out virtually no equity the entire time. Maybe to a couple of investors, but no employee equity.
Yeah.
So the employees were out going, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right. And my point is that was the wrong trade-off. Like, if you want to sell the big vision and you want to have people return to work, show up and collaborate, enjoy their team, participate in the culture, all those things, I do believe that they need to, like your e-commerce store, they need to have income generated along the way, and they need to participate in the payout.
Agreed.
And to do it that way, I thought was very, and the CEO seemed like a nice guy. I watched a quick little video of him being interviewed about it. And it wasn't nefarious or malicious on his point, but he also didn't know how to undo that doodle when he got to that exit, because he didn't know how to fairly compensate employees that were no longer with him, that were there at the start. He didn't know how to sort all that out. So he just kept the money.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't want to armchair quarterback another CEO when I haven't been in the boardroom where the conversations are happening. Mm-hmm. And I hope that lessons have been learned, right? Because I remember I did a really crappy job with compensation on my first company. I paid too much and I paid too little, and I blah, blah, blah. And it's the failures of that first company that has allowed me to set up better companies. Let me rephrase that. I didn't fail the first company. Everyone was super happy. Everyone got paid really, really well. The part that I have an opportunity to improve and learn was, how do I align incentives from the very beginning? And I had such a problem with succession planning. When it was time for me to step out, putting the right president in, I think I told you the joke was, if you want to get fired from Palmetto Security Group, go be the president or the CEO for a while, and that'll get rid of you. They called the CEO real dad, and then they called me stepdad. Stepdad came in, had a lot of fun on the weekend. Okay, guys, I'm out. And then real dad, anyway. No, wait, he was stepdad. I was real dad.
That's
vice versa. Yeah. So I'm real dad. I get you every other weekend and we just party and everyone loved when real dad showed up and then stepdad made you do your homework and brush your teeth. And so, yeah, I screwed up so bad. And that's why when setting up Hook, it was really, really important to be like, okay, what does succession look like? How do we gracefully handle these transitions? How do we put, and I don't know that we've got the answer, but I sure feel like we're better positioned to have good conversations around it.
Yeah, I think it's again, I'm not saying we've done it right, but we've done it different than other companies I've started, where Hook was the first company I walked into, also trying to protect ourselves in the upside, not just the downside.
Cool,
And
huh?
say like it's a real problem if we become wildly successful and we
Mhm.
haven't set ourselves up properly for it.
Yep.
And it's a real problem if we, crash this thing into the ground and we haven't set ourselves up properly for it. So like whatever scenario planning, I guess you can call it de-risking, but it's really scenario planning in my mind. Whatever scenarios emerge in your imagination about what the company could be, take them seriously and plan that out. Like, what does it mean for some employees who carry a lot of water up front, who might, like you said, exit the company? They're no longer have the same amount of value that they did. You create a corporate ladder because in a company like ours, we're creating a large corporation. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're a startup, but like one day I hope we're a large corporation.
Yeah.
And what does it mean if that employee's not at the top because they've just been there the longest? What if longevity doesn't mean that they're the VP? And
There is no tenure in Hook. You
yeah,
you do not just get to hang out because you've been there.
so how do you properly compensate them for the value of them creating a foundation in which a corporation can be built, but allow the people in the corporation now to also be compensated to take it to the next level?
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? Is those are real scenarios and real things you have to think about, and it might have been a low expectation or it might have been a high one. I don't know. But my intent is that the first 10 people who have spent more than a year with Hook would all become millionaires
Yep.
at some sort of liquidity event.
Yep. That's the
And
idea.
that was the upside aim. So when
Mhm.
I was trying to figure out number of options, packages, and how to put this together and what does it mean to that was the aim. Now, the next 10 to 50, they also participate, but they get set for the ride based on the ratios that their initial 10 got.
Correct.
And they get a discounted ratio. So they participate, but I'm not going to lose sleep if they're millionaires or not.
That's yeah, it's like startup CEO versus growth CEO versus, post IPO CEO, right? You have three jobs: capitalize the company, build the team, hold the vision. Part of capitalizing the company is having an idea what kind of team you're going to have so that you know how to capitalize it. And part of that, and so you have a real emotional drive to build amazing teams and to compensate them well that aligns with the vision and how you are raising and spending capital. And so let's work backwards from how do these first 10 people become millionaires. Okay, now I know the growth and I know the capital and I know the allocations, but the math gets so hard if you're like, how do I make everybody in the company $1 million? Right? Forever. And so
Mhm.
I'm almost like, that's future CEO problem. That ain't current CEO
Yeah.
problem.
And it
Yeah,
wasn't a scenario I imagined, right? Because
fair.
what I also was building in was how do I make amazing returns for our investors who took that risk so that I can
Yep.
play multiple rounds with them? Like this is just
Yeah.
one round of a lifetime of working with these investors,
Yep.
right? And that doesn't mean everything will come together, but I want to be able to go back to our current investors for projects 2, 3, 4, or they come to me. Like I've got a lifetime of projects ahead of me.
You sure do.
And I want to make sure that I'm setting the investor group up properly so they get recognized for their risk of capital, right? Because the trade off for being an employee throughout it all is they got a steady paycheck. Well, the investor got nothing as they waited and waited and gave advice and guidance and read
it's hitting me a little too close right now, dude. I'm one of the investors. Can we move on?
Yeah.
And they kept waiting and waiting, and I made promises, and they waited and they waited, and I was like, we're almost there, and then we waited. Yeah, no, I get it. Thanks, buddy.
But that,
Wow.
but your trade-off for that patience and that endurance
Yes.
is right. The investor's living exit to exit, while the employee lives paycheck to paycheck, and so that employees can find ways to navigate and not live paycheck to paycheck. That's not the point. The point is that at other considerations other than how do I make the first 10 millionaires, there are considerations. How do I give outsized returns to our shareholders,
right,
who invested capital, both for this project and perhaps future projects? And then, I mean, this might sound selfish, but it's the reason I'm in it. How do I enjoy the outcomes and build out my family tree? And I would not be an entrepreneur if I thought that I could make higher returns for my time and energy somewhere else.
Well, the idea of conscious capitalism that we've talked a little bit about before is this theory, that I would throw out there, that I truly believe in, which is we have a moral responsibility to generate incredible amount of personal wealth so that we can redeploy that wealth in ways that align with our values and how we want to do good in the world. I think each and every person on this planet with more wealth will do more good than depending on large bureaucracies or large organizations. So, yeah, I want you to have a crap ton of money because I trust Zach to do good with that money.
Yeah, I am also a fan of the democratization of capital. That is to decentralize capital away from sources like governments who spend money that is not theirs.
Yeah.
Right. It's not practically. The human beings within the government are spending money that is not their money.
That's right.
And move that closer and closer so that there's excess capital above, call it above living needs and requirements to people. So I'm a fan of the growth of the middle class. I'm a fan of the growth of the upper class as people have upward mobility. Economic mobility is a huge, to me, that's one of the most important things we can do. And on scale across the world today, we're alleviating poverty at a record rate. And that's important to me. And I think that's what conscious capitalism requires first.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about the fact that we're doing it. It is manifesting itself. And I would like to participate that both in the aggregate, but also on an individual level. I would like to be somebody who has excess liquidity so that I can put it to work for the ethical and moral things that I think money should be spent on.
Yep. Touche. I like that. What else do you want to talk about? I kind of had a big hurrah moment there with that last statement in my soul. Yeah. Hey, how's your oh, go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Good.
If you had excess liquidity over everything else, so house, lifestyle, college, future de-risk, where would you be putting capital?
Space. I think that a lot of the conflict, not all of the conflict, but a lot of the conflict that we experience on Earth is due to resource constraints. Either we got to get that oil, or hey, we're going to pollute these oceans, or let's go strip mine those mountains and I need my next cell phone. We got to get new metals, right? And I feel like there's a pressure on society as we have reached a certain stage. And I'm a true believer, I'm working on it now, a multi-planetary society that can harvest resources, not terrestrial based, but instead, extraterrestrial based, That to me is where I would go, because if we no longer have a population cap and we no longer have limited resources, all we have to do is deal with the fact that people think different and believe different things. That's a layup. That should be easy.
You know what? Here's one of the things that I think is very interesting about my observation about space, exploration of space, the that whole world that revolves around in the United States, NASA, and further on, but is that when we were in a space race with the Russians to get to the moon, there was certainly a tremendous amount of challenge and competition, but young boys and girls viewed it as fun.
Yeah.
It was an enjoyable thing to talk about. And somehow, in the progress of science and research, only the young people who viewed it as a career and moved into things like STEM, etc., we are now trying to reinsert fun back into it when it was just naturally fun to try to get to space. And I think one of my favorite things out there that's emerging is how Virgin and Richard Branson treat space as fun. And Elon Musk, for all of his, shadows, is also trying to treat space as fun. And there's something to their messaging that I think is very important. And I would love to see folks like you allocating capital, but also bringing messages and points of view that resonate with 5 to 10-year-old boys and girls who go, oh, space could be fun. And in that is how we actually start having belief sets, because the funness of space can transcend, like young boys and girls in Africa and Asia and the United States could all believe it's fun, and they can have that common ground together.
Yes. So I'm trying to find the nonprofit that I am working with, or about to start working with. It's a focus on space kids. So, and it's targeting the 6 to 10-year-olds. And my son's middle school has an elective called space flight. And he broke my heart by picking computer science. I'm like, I know that road, son. There's nothing down there. Don't do it. And so, I'm like, okay, kids are having fun with this. And then what I'm thinking about is I want to do a space entrepreneurial accelerator for 10-year-olds. I want to capture the minds and the spirits of that level of innovation and creativity. And it's space is totally open for business, and it is such a great framework, because when you talk about space, you're not just talking about rockets and satellites and you're talking about the hope of what if we're successful doing this, what does that mean for society? And you get to have cool conversations with young people about, what do you think a future society should look like if these things weren't issues? And they get permission to think about a world that's different than the one that they're in. It's pretty sweet, dude.
I agree. And I think when we start realizing that space is about taking everything about human experience and changing the location and perspective. I know that sounds like space humanity talk, but space for humanity talk. But the idea that like the person who is fascinated with animal life could talk about how do we allow animals in a non-research way to actually enjoy space, and what does that mean for them? And like, how do we bring the best of our culinary skills to space, as it were, and bring a new perspective? So I think part of my concern is that a number of these space programs are very STEM problem solving research based. And by the way, this
Yes.
might sound completely counterintuitive, but like you might have to allow a level of competition and I'm going to say you have to allow the young people to talk about like a space race again
Hmm.
and allow there to be winners. Because if you say all winners are just the people who participate in space and we're all going to get a participation trophy if we make it to space, I think you disengage from the best parts of our adventure. And so allowing young people to say, you can find your identity by being better than others in the space
Yeah.
race.
So I talked to a high schooler a couple weeks back. So you know I'm doing my moonshine distillery on the moon.
Mhm.
And the whole thing is that I want hundreds of teams competing on how do you build a orbital distillery for our first phase, which we're going to probably use Redwire or Space Forge or something like that, which the fact that there are 3 manufacturing platforms already in orbit that I can outsource to is boggling my mind.
Mhm.
And they compete against each other for price. It's like, what? It's working, guys. So I talked to this guy and he's so competitive. He's like an alpha nerd who just wants to win. I was like, you're 16 years old. Do you think you can come up with a better design to move the water vapor and the alcohol through the tubes in a microgravity situation better than NASA and MIT and all these guys? And he's like, they don't stand a chance. They're too trapped in the old ways of doing things. I got this. I'm like, okay. You said I got this. I'd like to hear we got this. Build a team and have social skills, nerd. but but the
Yeah.
people are desperate. I was dropping my son off, right? And he's just so good at math. And he's like, hey, how do I compete against other people in math? I was like, there is a drive to test yourself against other people.
Mhm.
And I like the idea that we can craft competition for good,
Yeah, and peer to peer. Like
peer to peer.
your son won't consider the NASA engineer a peer,
No,
but if he's better than somebody else in the same class at his school in something space related, it might seem counterintuitive because the instructor will want everybody to cross the finish line and everybody to win in that so that they can brag that 30 people are now interested in space, which isn't true,
no.
right? What you're really trying to do with a group of 30 is to find the 1 or 2 and let them create a hierarchy of interest and aptitude and ability through these programs. And that's
Agreed.
my it's not widely accepted in the STEM worlds. Of course, I ran a couple schools and we would constantly have these STEM programs and conversations about space and how to get people in tech and cybersecurity or get them into
Mm-hmm.
space. And, how do we get more young girls involved in it, et cetera. And I would offer up, you need to offer competition in which somebody crushes somebody else.
Yes.
And they said, no, we want everybody to win. We want this to be a platform where the outcomes are everybody moves
But
forward.
that's the thing that's so dumb is that you think in order to be inclusive, everyone needs to win. Inclusivity isn't giving everyone the same result. Inclusivity is giving everyone the same opportunity. I want to have a world where everybody has an on-ramp to the opportunities. And then I want a meritocracy. Unless it's me, then I want it to be based off of who I know. And I want to inside track and I don't want to participate in the rules. But everybody else, it's a meritocracy. It's slippery slope, huh? I want a society to function a particular way. I
Yeah.
wonder if I want to obey my own rules. That's interesting.
Well, and you want to, well, if this hierarchy is not something you can transcend, right? You're not good at the STEM math hierarchy, and there are people who are, and you don't have value.
Good point.
You need to be able to exit and go find a hierarchy you can participate in.
That's fair.
And so the issue is for young people, the amount of exposure they have when they believe there's only 1 or 2 hierarchies, largely coming from their parents and immediate family as to like what their job career could be or what the outcomes of life could be for them, then they will only explore those hierarchies.
Right.
And so that's to me, the young person's goal should be to compete in as many hierarchies as possible in the formative years. They should run at space and STEM. They should run at sports and they should run at music. They should have a run at all these other domains and fields, and they should see where their aptitudes, strengths, and interests carry them. And they should transcend that hierarchy as much as possible.
That's freaking awesome, dude. You're absolutely right. Man, I love an echo chamber where we agree with everything.
It's like,
I mean, you kind of
put,
yeah, 2 stones, 1 bird. What do you think about the memes we've been putting up there? I think we're using an angry bird head. I like the dead bird in the logo, honestly. I want the dead bird in the memes.
The dead bird is much more passive. The angry bird is much more militant about all the things that they're addressing and bringing up. So I don't personally know the virtual assistant that we're working with, but I was curious why she's so angry and why she views entrepreneurs as angry.
Not all angry. Some of them are also super depressed birds. Some of them, I think she's just observing. Maybe it's because she listened to you and she's like, "Oh man, this sounds like Zach's personality. He's an angry bird." Where Adam is passed out. Maybe that's what this bird is right here. Maybe that's a drunk ass bird who's passed out. It's like, that sounds like he needs to talk to somebody, get some help.
That's right.
Well, I wish you luck on your road trip, your road show next week.
Same to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because you never know what the meetings are. And so I'm really going down there and splashing the pot and trying to get the meetings. And usually I like to go with things already scheduled, and it's just not been that way. So I might just be putzing around Tampa. Anyone want to hang out? Let me know. Go to the Gen X bar. I've been to the Gen X bar. It's not as cool as I hoped. It's like you put no cap. That's not Gen X. That's this Gen Z.
Usually Gen X people don't know when I use Gen Z.
I took my daughter to her to a summer camp, and there was this like gift, like school store, and I walked in there and it's like, excuse me, no cap, but is there some Liddy Fresh drip in here that I can buy? And my 14-year-old's like, oh, just walked away. She's like, you're so bad at that. I'm like, no, I'm not. You understood what I said. So anyway, hey, weird flex, but okay.
Weird flex, but okay.
Okay. See you, Zach.
See you, Adam.
Hey, and thanks for joining us for the TSOB podcast. Find us on LinkedIn and give us your hot take. The whole reason we're doing this is to get access to better conversations that help us up our game. And if you have something you want to share, we want to hear about it. Find us on the TSOB LinkedIn group and jump in with 2 feet. We can't wait to chat.